A warm welcome to Business Daily. I am Yusuf Akogu. Let's take the business top stories. Glad to have you back. Now we go to the stock market to give you highlights of the stock trading as it went down on Tuesday. The market closed positive 0.43%. It ended. The volume of trade 377.970 million. The value at 5.169 billion in the deals of 6,729 exchange hands among investors. There, let's look at the top gaining equities on the day. Of course, Julius Berger gaining 10% to close at 36 naira. And of course 30 kobo. Go down to Computer Warehouse Group, a software development company, gaining 9.83% to close at 9 naira and 50 kobo. Of course, Champion Brewery also gaining 9.76% to close at 3 naira and 71 kobo. Let's look at the top losing equities by Multiverse there from the oil, mining sector, losing 9.49% to close downward at 2 naira and 67 kobo. Unity Bank, a bank back on the chart today, 9% it lost to close at 91 kobo per share. And of course, LRX also losing 8.05% to close downward there at 4 naira per share. Let's look at the performance in terms of volume. The Transat International doing about 44.1 million volume of shares there on the day. United Bank for Africa, 42.3 million volume of shares. And of course, Access Bank Holdings, the mother company of Access Bank, doing 33.3 million volume of shares. How is this performance reflected in the sector? The banking sector, the highest gainer indeed for the day, 2.75%. The industrial sector also gained 0.05%. The consumer sector closed in the negative. You can call it flat, as the case may be. The oil and gas sector, 0.03%. And of course, the insurance sector gaining 0.20%, a marginal gain indeed that may. Let's look at the rest of Africa. All in red. Joburg is down 0.31%. If you go down to Ghana, next on the board, also down 0.02%. And in Kenya as well, Nairobi Stock Exchange is down 0.1%. So these are the highlights of the stock trading as it went down on Tuesday across markets in Africa. We take a very quick break to bring you this report that is talking about the cost of corruption to the economy. You know, Nigeria is one of the country that is rated as one of the worst corrupt country in the world. This report by Shamu Dabem tells us more.
Nigeria has often been listed as one of the most corrupt nations in the world. With a score of 24 over 100, Nigeria ranks 150th out of 180 other countries. This is according to a research carried out by Transparency International in 2022. The prevalence of corrupt practices in Nigeria, as well as the dire impact it has had on the economy, the polity and its people, the NBS says this justifies appropriate data collection.
For us in Nigeria, this survey is unique because it focuses primarily on understanding the experience of corruption by Nigerians, rather than perceiving corruption, whether they encounter their public officers. Specifically, the survey enables data collectors on the prevalence of corruption and the main corruption typologies in Nigeria, as well as on Nigerians' attitude towards corruption. As this is the third installment of the survey following the 2017 and 2019 round of this survey.
The Statistician General of the Federation also stated that the survey would aid in analyzing the effectiveness of government policies geared towards tackling corruption in the country. Speaking on the sidelines, the director of ICTB, Fafumi, who represented the SGF, reiterated the importance of data collection in the fight against corruption.
What is helping policymakers is that it gives them the direction and the level at which corruption is in Nigeria. And it's now left to the policymaker and decision maker to use that figure to fight corruption in Nigeria. It's not about perception. It's about the reality, the experience. So we don't work with perception. We don't work with perception. We're the fact. That is what we do.
Corruption in Nigeria has spread across several levels, including socially, economically, and politically, causing losses worth billions of dollars. According to Yiaga Africa in 2021, Nigeria had lost $582 billion in 61 years as a result of corruption. Chamun Dabing, Trust TV News, Abuja.
That report set the tone for our discussion this morning. We're looking at the cost of corruption to the economy. How much more has this done to the economy since 1999 especially? A lot was said to have actually gone wrong since we returned to democracy. I'm being joined in the studio by Mark Amaza. Mark Amaza is the Senior Communications Officer from Yiaga Africa. Glad to have you on Business Daily.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yes, so much more has been lost since 1999, since we returned to democracy. We've had so much in terms of in the power sector, about the $16 billion, some call it the missing power. How much of damage do you think this mismanagement has done to the economy?
A lot. I don't know if we can ever be able to fully quantify, and I think it's even beyond just even before the start of the Fourth Republic. The report that your report quoted says in 61 years we've lost over $500 billion, and that's a lot of money.
Absolutely.
Because beyond just the actual amount lost, we also need to look at the opportunity cost of the scale of corruption. What could have been done with that amount of money if it was properly used in terms of the infrastructure that is missing, in terms of the human development we could have achieved, the schools, the hospitals, all of that. So it's a really mind-boggling amount, and we do our best to put a number to it. And not just Yiaga Africa, but many other groups, media houses around, but I don't think we can fully quantify the impact of, because, for example, what of the lives lost as a result of corruption?
Absolutely.
We can't put fully quantify it in dollar or naira and kobo terms.
Indeed. How can this be tackled? There seems to be so much leakages in so many government agencies. How can we block some of these leakages? Many governments have in the past have said they are introducing one or two policies, talking about the TSA, Treasury Single Account, and so many others to block all these leakages, but yet we keep having this problem.
There's a reason why corruption is always referred to in Nigeria as hydra-headed, because it's not one way to approach it. So there are preventive measures such as the TSA, which is really good, but then keep in mind that TSA is only being implemented at the federal government level. State governments haven't replicated that. But there also need to be punitive measures as well, where we have situations where persons who who are engaged in corruption need to be punished, and visibly punished, to send a message to others that this is not acceptable. We have a situation where even though we have some public officers who have been prosecuted and imprisoned, they are too few and far between compared to the scale of the corruption, that it doesn't send enough of a message. The message that people then hear is not that they should not engage in corruption, but rather they should not be caught. So there needs to be those preventive measures and those punitive measures as well. It's critical to look at it. For example, one huge aspect of leakage, for example, within our budget is how you see different MDAs budget different sums for the same prices. So if, for example, agencies are buying the same model of car, different agencies are having different quotations for the same kind of car. Vehicle, so those are kind of things that if you had processes around, can we do a centralized purchasing? These kind of things that will cut down costs, will have cost savings, but most importantly also reduce that room for corruption, where within the agency someone is able to inflate amounts on price of things, so that all those kind of opportunities need to be reduced significantly. So those is going to be a whole collection of measures that need to be put in place to really cut down on corruption. So
do you think the agencies saddled with the responsibility of fighting corruption, the ICPC and the EFCC, are handicapped in this matter?
Beyond just, it also meets a couple of other agencies. There's also the Code of Conduct Bureau, which also saddled with tackling those things. While they seem to be doing their best, this is still not good enough in terms of they need to go further in terms of tackling these issues, in terms of whether it is going after especially politically exposed persons. You have, if for example you have a former governor who was on camera collecting bribes, and you say you can't touch him because of immunity. Now he's been out of office. What are you doing about the matter? Is the case back in play, or are you just looking away? Those kind of things are important, because when you now look away or seem to look away, you send the wrong message to people, like I said earlier on, around it's not about doing the crime, it's about do not get caught. Do not get caught, or depends on the amount of money that you steal.
Exactly. You can actually do plea bargain. Exactly. So what do you make of that? Plea bargain. So you can steal 50 billion and then they will ask you to return 5 billion.
Even for me, I'm personally not a fan of plea bargains. I understand sometimes plea bargains are a question of trying to save costs on prosecuting, or basically what you can't really prove the allegations you have labeled against someone. But because they are done so quietly and secretly, justice is not seen to be done. So we don't know who have done the plea bargain. We only hear of it like as backroom gossip, but we can't authoritatively say this person and that person has done a plea bargain and returned this amount of money. And again, if justice is not done and not seen to be done, you have this. I think a bit of the digression, we underestimate how much the corruption has really eaten into the fabric of our society. It's become a norm, sort of like you that is not engaged in it are seen as the odd one, rather than the person who engages in it. And when you do not begin to make clear public examples of people who have engaged in corruption and do it without fear or favor, other people will not learn lessons and adjust their ways.
Indeed. We have also heard that some people actually speak against corruption when they are not in position to be corrupt themselves. So we've had instances where some people, when they are in a civil society or some activism group, it's time to speak against corruption. But when they get the opportunity to be part of it, they're kept, in a way, quiet. And then, some say, when you are eating, you don't talk.
You stole my thunder. I was going to quote that proverb. But yes, unfortunately, we have those kind of situations where people who are outside of government are very vocal against it, are very loud against it. And then when they're in government, they keep quiet. Also, not even justify it. I mean, I'll make an example of how when a former minister of finance was accused of certificate forgery, which is a form of corruption itself, and a leading lawyer who used to be very vocal against corruption said, who was now in government at that time, said, oh, it doesn't matter if she forged her certificate or not, she's doing a good job in her position. Those kind of situations speaks to how much it has eaten into that fabric I mentioned earlier. If you now begin to feel your integrity is dependent on the circumstances you are in, and when you are not, when you're out of government, it's convenient to speak against it, then we need to do a little soul searching as a society and as a country regarding how we got to this point and how we need to move
out of it. Well, quite a whole lot there. Let's look at the World Bank study. According to World Bank, they said over 1.1 trillion naira per year account for up to 12% of GDP GDP, gross domestic product, of nations like Nigeria, Kenya, and Venezuela. Where corruption is not just a Nigerian thing, but the scale at which we perpetrate corruption here is an issue here.
Yes, it's not just a Nigerian thing. Even in the most developed countries, there is corruption. And it's not to justify the corruption we have here. I think, one, the scale, what was the word? The way we're so brazen about it. That's what I was looking for. The way we're so brazen about it. If, for example, in a United Kingdom, for example, where you have maybe a scandal around maybe expense of MPs, you see the MPs going helter-skelter, doing their best to explain away, or if they see they can't, they maybe resign or stuff, things like that. But here we do it and then we shrug and we move on. There's this and so what attitude towards it. So that scale, and the brazenness of it is one of the reasons why it almost becomes almost as though everyone who has the opportunity, whether you're a clerk in a ministry or whether you're a minister or higher up, we try our best to maximize those opportunities. And that's why if we just tackle it piecemeal or treat with kid gloves, I mean, I don't know how much it can get worse from here, but it will just get worse.
It will just get worse. What about the way that we celebrate ill-gotten wealth in Nigeria? If you're in a particular position, maybe an appointee of government or an elected representative of the people, and you don't amass wealth while in office, by the time you return home, your people tend to look at you like somebody that is not a very serious somebody.
Yeah, I agree. Sadly, really sadly, even before you even leave office, you have situations where the moment you're into government, you're given the choice seats in your place of worship. You're being invited to 1,000,001 launching events. You're getting all kinds of requests from your constituents or people that are your people. And for most of them, frivolous personal reasons. All of those things add pressure on people in government to, engage in corruption. It's not to me say that there aren't those who have been under that pressure and have surmounted it, but it's also because we have it's that makeup of our society, or that reflection of our society, how much corruption has shaped it such that it's okay if you do this, as long as you do that, you help others, or so on, and things like that. The sad thing is, the flip side of it is, because we're engaging in that amount of corruption, those that go cap in hand begging those in government or in power and in positions to steal or engage in corruption, do not realize that by that act that they are pressuring them to do, is also come back to affect them, because it means they are depriving them of the resources that have been used to help their lives, in a more sustainable way, rather than just hand out from time to time, if you're even lucky to get it more than once.
Indeed. So in a way, you can't just blame those in power alone.
No.
The society themselves are also part of the problem.
Yeah, I mean, so people that go into government, whether it's elective positions, appointed positions, as in the civil service, they're not divorced from the Nigerian society. They emerge from the Nigerian society. So let's be honest about it. Again, not making justifications for them, but we do not expect, we're not going to be ruled by angels from heaven, in the sense of it will still be Nigerians from Nigeria that will emerge and govern us. So certainly, as much as we need to call out both the behavior of engaging in corruption, but also the behavior of expecting to benefit from the process of corruption.
Indeed. Let's put some faces to this now. Like in 2015, there was an independent report conducted by Natural Resources Governance Institute. According to them, Nigeria lost over 6.4 trillion to corroborating NNPC oil sales as at that time. That's a huge amount of money. When you are, as a country, you're losing this kind of amount of money to just corruption alone, how much more do you think you can actually earn to invest in infrastructure?
Again, I mean, you're making my point for me. So when that skill is being lost, it means opportunity costs are very high.
Yeah, this is just one sector.
This is just one sector. 6.4 trillion naira or dollars, did you say?
6.4 trillion naira. That's naira, about $32 billion.
Exactly. So I mean, we can begin to imagine if you put that amount into our tertiary education. Every now and then we have our labor unions, whether it's ASU, ASUP, or COASU, go on strikes because of poor funding of tertiary institutions. Imagine we put that amount, imagine the amplifier effects in our society today. So for every 1 naira that is being stolen, whether it's from different forms of corruption, whether it's diversion of funds, contract splitting, inflation, all sorts, it's one area that has been deprived from investing in improving our country in many, many different ways. And we now see it all around in the scale of poverty, in the unemployment, in the in the struggle, in economic despondency that we are in. Corruption is a huge part of that.
Indeed, but for an agency like NNPC, is a very big agency that the government relies so much on revenue from that sector to provide basic amenities and infrastructure for the people. For an agency like that to be tainted with issues like this, what do you think that this will tell, especially to even investors that even want to come here and invest in that sector? Recently, we've seen some companies, IOCs, divesting their investment, moving out of the country. Some of them citing these corrupt practices in various government sectors.
I mean, by when they engage in such corruption, it means a lot of ways in which they could have improved that oil sector. So, for example, NNPC as a state-owned oil company engages in joint venture projects with IOCs, and then if you do not have the cash to finance your own end of those kind of joint venture arrangements, because you likely have diverted some of the money to has been lost in corruption, or you can't remit crude oil proceeds because some of them have found their ways to private pockets. It creates that amplifier effect along the way from within the sector, where you're not sending a wrong message to investors, local and foreign, and then you're also depriving the federation of crucial revenue that could be used to finance governments, to provide infrastructure, to provide services, to improve our lives. So and it's not just NNPC. NNPC we might just know NNPC more because of its place of importance.
Yes, absolutely.
Across every agency, government agency. We may even say yes, even the private sector. But with the private sector, it's as a business owner, if you know that money is being diverted, it gets to a point that that if I don't act
do
on
something,
it,
you may actually go under.
Exactly, you go under. But across all business agencies, government agencies, at all levels of government, whether it's federal, state, local governments, we have them in different forms and shapes and sizes.
Indeed. Another area is also taxation as well. Some say corruption cannot be fought effectively unless Nigeria deal with tax fraud. What do you make of that? And there is also a report that says that Nigeria loses 100 billion annually to tax evasion.
Yeah. So I do agree with that there's a lot of tax fraud that happens, whether it's those who evade tax, those who underreport their financials,
revenue.
Exactly, revenue, so that they have they
pay less tax.
And this is whether it's individuals or corporations. There's a flip side to that also, that the fact is one of the reasons why also we have this we have seemed to embrace corruption is also because we believe we have oil, we just sell our oil, which we're not even producing enough for the country. And taxation, oftentimes they link it between taxation or improving tax collection and the desire to fight corruption, because at that point you're taxing productive activity. But then taxation is also a huge loophole where we see a lot, again, whether it's at the federal level, at state levels, on sorts, whether it's private companies or individuals who evade tax, or whether it's those that are collecting taxes, not accounting for it fully, or whether they are the ones also helping private companies and individuals to evade tax.
And also help themselves as well.
Exactly.
All right, let's look at as we wind down now, proceeds of corruption. We've had instances where monies are recovered from corrupt individual, and at the end of the day, we really do not see what this money were actually being used for. Talk about the Abacha loot, in quotes, would have been talking about it, talk about so many people in government offices that were involved in corruption, and at some point we heard that some part of those money were recovered from them. At the end of the day, some call it loot. The loot recovered has also been relooted.
Yes, so one of the things with increasing accountability in governance is, or people's trust in governance, is being open, especially with financial information. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. When these things are shrouded in secrecy or in mystery, you provide that room for this kind of beliefs to emerge. So, for example, if we know about the Abacha loots, how much is being recovered because there are this money coming from outside Nigeria, and even if the Nigerian government won't reveal it, those foreign governments that are returning the money often do reveal it or try to make Nigeria as much as possible commit itself to spending the money for the people. But what about all the money we are getting from, say, from plea bargains, for example, as you mentioned earlier, recovered internally? How is it being accounted for? It's very, very important for the government and for these crime-fighting agencies to be very open and forthcoming with such information so that citizens do not need or are being left to wonder what happens to the money. I try my best not to lump everyone in government or everything done by government people into one pot, but then it's really difficult to make the argument for them when you also see where the way perhaps people in government live their lives or spend money, or the kind of the way government spends money on its own officials, and then it's far divorced from the reality or the way Nigerians live.
Absolutely.
And so on.
All right, as we wrap up now, let's look at the kind of penalties or measures that government can put in place. In China, they have stringent conditions or penalties. Or in most Asian countries, you have all of that. Don't you think we can actually replicate that here?
I don't necessarily think we must have the death penalty for corruption, and it may not be the most popular thing to say. I think it's not necessarily also the fact that we have weak penalties. It's the fact that we don't make enough of an effort to implement what already exists in terms of prosecuting, doing a diligent prosecution of those we believe are corrupt. A lot of times, for example, we see a lot of media trials where persons are being accused, and then it's all played out in the media, and then when it gets to court, they are unable to make their case in court and and get secure conviction. Those are the kind of things that we need to look at. So it's not necessarily a case of having stiffer penalties. I mean, how are we even doing with the current penalties that we have?
All right, Mr. Mark Amaza, Senior Communications Officer, Yiaga Africa. I must thank you for your time on Business Daily.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate your contribution. With that is a wrap on the show today. We'll be back tomorrow. I am Yusuf Akogu.